All right, welcome back everyone to the M4BL track of Keep It 100. I really hope you enjoyed that break, and I hope you got some good juicy nuggets out of our climate talk. Next up, we have Monifa Bendele, who is one of the leaders inside of the movement for Black Lives, particularly on our policy table, and she's going to talk to us about the Breathe Act and all the things you need to know about the Breathe Act. Over to Monifa.
Yes. Peace, everybody, and welcome to our discussion about the Breathe Act. We're going to talk about Breathe, we're going to talk about Defund the Police, and we're going to talk about Invest, Divest. And I played a little clip from last summer because we've all heard Defund the Police as the clarion call coming out of so many demonstrations, mobilizations, public hearings, organizing events last summer that brought out 25 million of our folks from coast to coast. And there's a lot behind that. It wasn't just a clarion call. We also have a huge and comprehensive policy agenda behind Breathe and behind Defund the Police. So first, I want to introduce us, the Movement for Black Lives. We are an ecosystem of over 150 Black-led organizations coming out of the Ferguson uprisings. Many of our organizations emerged at that time, but many organizations were also around for decades before. And so last year, in the wake of the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and so many more, we took to the streets under Juneteenth, under the banner of Juneteenth, to demand transformational change from the ground up. We called to defund the police, but we also called to invest in Black communities. Many people tried to mischaracterize defund the police as a call to not have safe communities, but actually defund means more safety, not less. Defund means doubling down on public health approaches to safety because we understand that violence is a public health issue. We know that white supremacist racism continues to be a public health emergency, and that the budgets in our cities and our states are a moral document. We have known for too long that police have oversized budgets and outsized political power, which allow them to exist above the law, no matter what small incremental whack-a-mole policy changes we make. How do we defund the police? First, I want to throw up a resource for everyone out there. We've been working all year, really led by the members of our policy table in the Movement for Black Lives, especially an amazing organization called Interrupting Criminalization. And there is a website called defundpolice.org. And this is a collaboration between dozens of our organizations. It helps you to figure out what your city's budget is, how to do an assessment of where your police budget can be cut. And it's really a one-stop shop on all the information you need to actually build a truly safe community in your cities and in your states. So just zooming out a bit, how do we defund the police? You know, people wanted to know, is it something that happened instantly overnight? Is it incremental? Well, it really depends on who you are and where you're organizing. But here's just some ideas that emerged that you will find a deep dive on the defundpolice.org website. One way is to withdraw police departments from state and federal grant programs that provide things like surveillance tech, military gear and weapons, training, and automated decision-making tools. It's also by doing things like removing police from schools and universities, and also establishing non-police alternatives to 911 calls that involve people who are in mental health distress or need other forms of health assistance. It also means repealing laws that hide and enable excessive police violence and misconduct. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many ways that we can defund the police. And why we do this is that we are actually calling for care. Here in New York City, every year, we stand with an amazing champion on defund, which is a mother named Hawa Ba. 8 years ago, Hawa Ba called 911 because her son Muhammad was in emotional distress. She called for an ambulance. She begged for an ambulance. Except minutes later, an ambulance didn't come. What came were police officers who ultimately killed her son. We want to lean in to non-punitive, non-carceral interventions because we know that if a mother like Hawa Ba could have gotten care instead of cops, then Muhammad Ba would still be with us. So would Walter Wallace, so would Daniel Prude, and so many others whose families were calling for care. Okay, my clicker has stopped working. Okay. So on the local level and on the state level, while we fight to defund the police, we also have a federal bill. We have an initiative called the Breathe Act, which seeks to, on a very high level, challenge Congress to also work to shift money from criminalization and incarceration into real public safety. So the Breathe Act is an omnibus federal bill that really focuses on just that, channeling those federal dollars into non-punitive public safety focused interventions, as well as fueling what we know has been defunded in our communities for so long, like education, health, housing, and other social investments that we need. We didn't just come up with the Breathe Act last summer. The Breathe Act is actually the legislative manifestation of a policy platform that emerged out of the Ferguson uprisings called the Vision for Black Lives. And so you can check out the actual text of the Breathe Act at breatheact.org. And you can also go to M4BL.org under platforms to look at the Vision for Black Lives, which is the foundation. The Breathe Act has 4 very exciting, very delicious sections that really help us to bring what we have known for decades, what our ancestors have known for centuries, which is that the carceral state is not here to keep us safe. So step 1, divest from policing and mass incarceration. Step 2, invest in public safety and the interventions we know we need. Step 3, reallocates dollars to things like education, housing, healthcare. And step 4 is where we pull out our accountability measures. So let me go a little deeper into each one of these sections. So section 1, when we talk about defunding and terminating federal programs and agencies that fuel the carceral system, think of things like the COPS program. Think of things like the 1033 program that supply military weapons to local police officers. The COPS program sends billions of dollars every year into police departments in cities where there's not enough housing, where there's food deserts. We also want to turn off the spigot of money that is fueling the Department of Justice budget and ultimately enact federal legal system policy changes that, number 1, decriminalize and also shrink mass incarceration in the United States and in our communities. So lag on the clicker. Sorry about that. Section 2 is now where we invest. It directs Congress to create a community public safety agency. We know that the agencies that exist today that are supposed to bring forth community safety actually fuel harm in our communities. So we are really looking to go outside of the Department of Justice, look at places like HHS, Health and Human Services, and stand up an agency that will actually fuel things into our communities, like medics, like people who can provide emergency mental health services. It really works to establish one grant program that will make grants available to local jurisdictions, that can establish non-carceral local public safety offices. These offices would be independent of our local police departments. And then Section 3 is where we dream big. This is where we envision a life without cages. We stand up new grant programs in education, making sure that people have stable housing, healthcare. If there's anything that this pandemic has taught us, is that our public health infrastructure has been defunded and is sorely lacking. So the BREATHE Act demands in Section 3 that we stand up new grant programs that bring about safety in our communities. And then last but not least, a lot of times when people hear the word abolition, when they hear the word defund, they think that we are not about accountability. We're actually 100% about accountability, but we're about real accountability. Section 4 looks at systems accountability, looking into reparations for the harms that have been created in our communities due to things like the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and also chattel slavery. Section 4 makes sure that not just individual police officers are held accountable for harming communities, but entire police departments lose their ability to police our communities because of the patterns and practices that exist. And last but not least, making sure that our voting rights are protected so that we can put people in office that make sure that the forces in the city, whatever they're called, are held accountable to these standards. So we call on you today to take action. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can go to breatheact.org and sign on to become a community co-sponsor of the bill. At the same time, you will also generate a letter to your member of Congress asking them to support Breathe and to really interrogate the existing bills out there and look for things that have real solutions. And then on the local level, go to defundpolice.org and you will have all the toolkits you need to build a local campaign. And we are winning, y'all. I mean, if you look just in the past 10 months, since we were out in the streets last summer demanding to defund the police, $870 million has been divested from police forces across the country. And that's just the beginning. We can do so much more to make sure that the next generation of Black folks actually live in communities where we can not only survive in those communities, but we can also thrive. Send us your questions. You can drop them in the link that's appearing in the chat. I can answer some of those questions now, or we can answer them ongoing throughout the rest of the day. But get involved, y'all. The time is now. Not only did our folks take to the streets in the face of militarized police, in the face of violent white supremacists, vigilantes, and in the face of a global pandemic to say that enough is enough. We will no longer exist in these police states and pretend that it's some form of community safety. So join us, get down, we're ready for you. Join Breathe.
All right. Thank you so much, Monifa, for teaching the people all about the Breathe Act and how to get involved. If you missed that, y'all, breatheact.com or defundthepolice.org. You also can text DEFUND to 90975. Once again, text DEFUND to 90975. If you weren't able to send in your questions, still send them in. They'll get answered. We have a really robust policy table with some brilliant leadership over there. Thank you for joining us here at Keep It 100, sponsored by The Frontline. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Paris Hatcher.